Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. This episode is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Call us at 719-452-4803. Here's your host, Trevor Sherry.
Welcome to the podcast. We're so grateful that you have decided to join us again and hope that you are enjoying some of the conversations we're having and are looking forward to the conversations that we are going to have as much as Mark and I are looking forward to them. I am joined here today by Dr. Mayfield. Dr. Mayfield, how are you today?
What's going on? If you've made it to the fourth episode, we thank you. Are we fourth episode or fifth episode?
I think we're at fifth.
Oh, fifth.
I think we're at fifth.
I lost one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you are all listening still.
Yeah, we're super excited about today because we get to talk a little bit about some questions that we hear a lot about how to find a good counselor. We know that there are a lot of counselors, and we want to make sure that we communicate the best way to find a counselor, whether that's coming to Mayfield Counseling Centers, where we've been really intentional about the counselors that we add to the staff, or going somewhere else. We want to be able to equip you to know some of the insider lingo, what some of the acronyms stand for, what...
We have a lot of things that people like, abbreviations after our names that people don't understand, so I get it, yeah.
So we're going to explain some of those. We're going to explain what that process can look like, and how to tell some good signs and some bad signs, hopefully, to just make sure that you're able to go into it really smart, kind of like shopping for a toaster, doing your research ahead of time and knowing what all of the technical aspects of that toaster are.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because how much research do we do when we're looking for a toaster or a crock pot or a car or a house, right? And we don't put this much effort into our mental health, and so I like that analogy, because it's all about the outcome and our outcome, and we want somebody that can walk with us on this journey of life and the messiness that it is, and it not be more complicated.
Yeah, because it can be super complicated, especially like you talked about. We have, I know an individual who's got their name and then PhD, LPC, LAC, LMFT, and NCC. And it's like this, it's like she's trying to get half the alphabet into her name, and right. It makes no sense unless you have some prior understanding of what those mean.
So let's start with that. I think if you're good with that, I think let's start with, especially here in Colorado, but if you're listening from a different state, there are going to your state licensing boards and the definitions around it. I know that an LPCC here means licensed professional counselor candidate, but in Texas it means licensed professional clinical counselor, right?
Interesting.
So you just need to know, and this is, I think, one of the, in my opinion as a counselor, one of the issues with the field is that we don't have standardization of language across state lines. And so I'm going to be speaking from Colorado, and if you're listening in a different state, we can just encourage you to do your homework. It's pretty close to what we're doing here in Colorado, but it might be the extra C means not a counselor in training, but a clinical counselor or whatever.
Yeah, and so the abbreviations will be Colorado based, but somewhat translatable to other states, and then the aspects of what a good counselor is, and that process should be translatable across state lines.
Well, absolutely. So Colorado is a little bit unique in the sense that, well, not a little bit unique, I guess a lot unique, in that somebody could become what we call a registered psychotherapist if they pay $180 and take a test called the jurisprudence exam. And I want our listeners just to sit with that for a second. Anybody can go take a test, pay $180, and become a registered psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. Now, obviously, we've changed that. That's what it used to be. Now you have to have a bachelor's and your continuing education. So we're putting some parameters around that. But sometimes people go, aren't you a registered psychotherapist? That sounds a little bit more like you've got more education than just a licensed professional counselor. And I'm like, no.
And that's abbreviated to RP.
RP, right. So if you see somebody with their name and they have an RP behind it, they're a registered psychotherapist. Now, you can ask the question, because we have some people here on staff that are RPs, but they're in the process of finishing their education, or they're in the process of compiling their transcripts to get sent in so they can apply for, so don't just assume, but ask questions around that. A licensed professional counselor candidate is somebody that has graduated from a master's program, specifically one that is accredited, and they're working towards their licensure hours. And so an LPCC is a really big deal because they are actually working towards 2,000 hours of post-graduation supervision towards getting their licensure. So we don't just go get a master's degree and then start doing things on our own. There's another step in the process, and it's 2,000. The state of Colorado is 2,000 hours. Virginia is 4,500. Texas is 3,500. There's different states have different requirements.
And that's typically over 2 years. So for 2 years after your grad school, you're being supervised by a licensed therapist and meeting with clients, and you have to get 2,000 hours.
Right. So that's a candidate. So there might be an LMFTC, so a licensed marriage and family therapist candidate. That's another thing. There's what we call an MSW, a Master's of Social Work, and so they're working on becoming a licensed social worker, LCSW or LCW.
LSW.
Thank you.
LSW.
I'm going crazy in my head with these abbreviations here. LSW is a licensed social worker, or you can work for your clinical license and be LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. So every kind of field within the counseling paradigm has their candidates in training, even a psychologist. So a psychologist is a little bit different, is that they have to get their doctorate, whether a PhD or a PsyD, a doctorate in psychology, and then do a graduate residency or postdoc fellowship is what they call it.
So you just threw out LPC, LPCC,
threw out a lot.
LSW, MFT, LMFT. There's licensed addiction counselors.
I just tell our listeners, don't turn off the radio, please, or the podcast, because we'll get to a point here in a minute.
Which is what I'm going to get to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different acronyms.
There are.
And there are some that are more important than others.
Sure.
What if I'm looking for just individual counseling, I want to talk through just some of my relationships and whatever. What am I looking for?
And a licensed marriage and family therapist candidate or licensed marriage and family therapist, LMFT or LMFTC, is a good choice because you know that the person with the C at the end of their name is getting good supervision, or an LPC, licensed professional counselor or licensed professional counselor candidate. Again, that person is getting good supervision or should be getting good supervision. And you can ask that question. You can sit down with somebody with an LPCC and go, okay, I'm a little educated, maybe enough to be dangerous here.
Yeah.
Tell me about your supervisor. Who's your supervisor?
Yeah.
And you can, as a consumer, you need to ask those questions. I think, we don't ask those questions like we do of a tire salesman at Sears or, going over to CarMax and getting our, car or whatever.
Yeah.
We should be asking these questions of not only our counselors, but our doctors and everything else,
And I want to point out too, having my position currently with Mayfield Counseling is that I talk to everybody who calls us, and I find out what's going on in their lives and try to connect them with a therapist that I think is going to be the best fit for their needs.
Right.
And as I've been doing that, sometimes I get somebody who is educated enough to be dangerous, and so they ask for only licensed or only the psychologist or only somebody with a PhD. And I know that there are several LPCCs here that are phenomenal, and I would want to go to if I didn't work with them.
Right. Yes. And so it's just a matter of comfortability. I think that's where we're going to, as we go through a list of kind of what qualities do you need to look for in a counselor and how do you need to make a choice that's right for you, is that an LPCC, yes, they're in that learning stage, but it's almost, they've got their bumper lanes. They should have their bumper lanes set up quite well, where a supervisor is going to come in and give insight and I think there's that hunger to learn. So, I think it's a personality fit too. It's going back to episode 3 of the growth mindset versus fixed mindset, is that in order to be good at this field, you have to have a growth mindset.
So let's go with that just a little bit. I find a LPC who seems to be, he seems qualified enough. It's a guy, which is something that I want, and I call him directly and try to connect with him. What am I looking for once I hear him on the phone or meet him in person?
Well, I think first of all, timeliness of response is huge, right? So if you are calling people and nobody's calling you back, and then somebody that you called 2 weeks ago or 6 days ago is calling you back, I'd still be a little bit wary, because it's this idea of timeliness of response. And we talked about this last episode, that if, why counseling, a lot of times we pick up the phone because we're in crisis. And obviously we don't want that. We want people to be a little more proactive. But if you're in crisis, you want somebody that's going to be responsive to your needs, because that tells you a lot about how they do counseling. And I think, but if you're sitting with somebody and you're in this kind of awkward stage of, I'm kind of interviewing you for a position. You're going to be the position of my counselor. And I think you should take a look at it that way. I am interviewing you as the counselor, and the counselor, of course, is going to be doing the same thing. And if they're doing their job well, they should have a pretty extensive intake packet where they're asking you a lot of questions about you and getting a better conceptualization of who you are and what that looks like. But you're gonna notice, if you end up at their office, what does their office look like? Is it put together? I've been to some counselors where their office was so cluttered, it felt like it was like what was going on inside my head, and I couldn't ever feel comfortable or relaxed. And I think that's a big deal too, in the space aspect of sitting down and feeling relaxed in your counselor's office.
So if this guy tells me his address and then I find out it's the basement of his mom's house,
run.
Okay.
The opposite direction.
Duly noted.
Yeah. Well, we are held to ethical standards. We have the ACA, American Counseling Association Code of Ethics. Psychologists have their code of ethics. The LMFT have their ethics. We're held to ethics for a reason. And one of them is it's really strongly suggested, almost to black, still a little bit of gray, but almost to black, that you don't do these things in your own home, in your mom's basement or your garage.
So I want to go to their office. I want to check to make sure that it looks professional. It looks comfortable. It's not like there aren't rats running around.
Right.
Some more obvious things. But what about for somebody who, like, if I walk into an office and things seem to check out, they have their LPC, their office looks really tidy, they responded to me in a timely manner, and then I meet them, and then there's just something in me that's like, well,
I think you pay attention to how you feel, and I'm going to put a caveat on that. If everything checks out to the point of your first appointment, you're sitting down for the intake, and you're still feeling a little bit uneasy, is it the fact that you're in counseling, or is it the fact you're with this counselor? And I always say, give it 3 to 5 sessions. So stick it out for 3 to 5 sessions, because maybe the relationship should develop in those 3 to 5 sessions. If they don't by 5 sessions, then it might be time to go, you know what, this might not be a good fit. And any counselor that's worth their weight will tell you in the intake that if this is not a good fit, I will help you find a good fit. And it might not be, if it's a multi-group practice or a center like Mayfield Counseling, I'm going to help you find the best fit for you. And if they don't, that's a red flag.
Now, do we have to take into consideration as clients, like university that a therapist went to, what kind of like social club of counselors they're a part of? Or
I think that adds to the clout. If anybody, I'm gonna say this in acronym, and I'm not gonna tell you what it means. Just go to this website if you're interested. It's called KCREP, and it's let me look it up here because I'm gonna butcher it for y'all. It's CACREP, CACREP.org. So KCREP.org is a place that accredits universities for counseling degrees. So CACREP.org. And it's really important that I chose my university based off of its accreditation and as a KCREP program, because I know that they are following set curriculum to train me to be the best counselor I can be once I graduate. There are other organizations, other universities that aren't, and you just don't know. You just don't know what they're being taught and what they're learning, and it's nice to have that standard. So CACREP.org, and it has a list of the I think it's 200 or so universities that have been accredited for counseling.
Got it. I want to bring up just a small thing that I see a lot, and I recognize in myself as well, is coming to counseling with a preconceived notion of who I want to see. And
what do you mean by that?
So I have had calls, and I've felt this way before too, of I only want to see a 40-year-old man who has been doing counseling for 15 years and has written a book on counseling or something. And as someone who's learning in the field of counseling and interacting with a lot of interns who are still in their masters and professionals who are either pre-licensed or just licensed, they get that too of a client comes in and they may be older than the therapist, and there's this not disrespect, but just a sizing up of, are you actually able to do this job well? You're 10 years younger than me.
Yes. And that goes back to other conversations about teachableness, about humility. And you're right to think that way. And so I think in some ways, that's why I say give it 3 to 5 sessions. Help them prove you wrong. And if a counselor comes in and starts just shooting off the hip of what they think's going on in your life without really getting to know you, that's a red flag as well. Because as I sit in the chair as a counselor and I'm sitting across from my client, I might have all the educational training in the world, and I'm still not an expert on your life. I need to know you, and you are the expert on your life. And so if a counselor doesn't value that or validate that, it's a red flag as well.
I'd love to know what you, as an individual, think are characteristics of that make a good therapist.
That's a good question. I think attentive to detail. I think are they a people person, right? I think people know what I mean when I say that. But are they warm? Are they welcoming? Do they create this sense of, you know what? Thanks for being here. You're really important. Like they draw you in, right? Attentiveness. I've met some individuals that have come and seen me, and I said, so it looks like you're on your intake packet that you've been to a couple different counselors. I always am curious, why did you leave? Well, they said, I couldn't remember my story from session to session. That's a big deal. Like, I am so intently interested in my clients and their stories because I want to enter into their story and I want to really help them figure out life that I'm going to either take really good notes, which you should, or I'm going to be really attentive to that so that when I come back, I'm not mixing them up with client I saw 2 days ago and them. And it's amazing how quickly you can be drawn into forgetting. And so it's that attentiveness to detail, being acutely aware and interested in their story. I'm not really the flip side, but is it just coffee talk? Like you, Trevor, and I can go have some coffee and we can talk about a lot of really good things and I can challenge you on some stuff, but we're friends. And there's an aspect of that to counseling is that it's going to model a friend relationship. But if you're, stuck in something that you shouldn't be stuck in, or you're not recognizing, your error of your way or whatever it might be, and your counselor's just going, oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe next time try it. Like, no, it needs to be this, okay, like seriously, like how badly do you want to change? Like really entering into that and confronting and making you feel uncomfortable. If all your counselor does is make you feel comfortable, it's a red flag. Get out of there, because counseling should not be change. Growth should not be a comfortable process.
And I think that's an intimidating thing for some, but also with what we talked about a couple weeks ago of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, that uncomfortability is what grows you and makes you a better person. And that's really the goal of these conversations, is to be the best we can be and to have deeper and more meaningful relationships that build. And that's a piece of growth. And so it would make sense that it would be a part of counseling as well.
It is. So take it to the extreme. If all your counselor is doing is making you feel uncomfortable and fighting with you and not listening or not empathizing or not entering into your story from a place of sensitivity, right, then I would question that as well. Like, there's got to be this balance where it's not all or nothing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot to look for when you're trying to find a therapist, and hopefully our listeners have been able to make a little bit more sense out of all the acronyms that we use.
I hope so, because I kind of confused myself there.
And there are more, and we Mark and I are more than willing to reach out to you if you have more questions, if you're looking for counseling. I do want to put out there that if you would like to talk to somebody at Mayfield Counseling Centers, we have something that we do called 15-minute consultations. And those are free. You'll reach out to us and ask to do a 15-minute consultation with one of our therapists, get to know them, see how you feel as you're meeting them, and see if they are this person that you can enter into a relationship and who you can allow to push you to grow. What the process looks like for us, at least, is you call us and we try to be real prompt in returning your calls and getting back to you really fast and connecting you with a therapist either that week or the next week. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to us either over our phone number, which will play at the end of this podcast, or you can find us on our Facebook, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.
Yeah, message us on the Facebook or email us too if you want to.
Yeah, and the email to use would be contact@mayfieldcounseling.com. We would love to hear from you. Also, I want to encourage our listeners that as we continue, we do want to hear from you. So go ahead and post a comment on our Facebook page, some questions that you have, or start some dialogue over there on things that stood out to you in the past few weeks and things that you would love for us to talk about in coming weeks. Dr. Mayfield, I see you as a great therapist, though I've never been in session with you. I know who you are and the education you've had, and I'm grateful for you sharing some of that wisdom. And I do think it's important, as we end this, to mention that you got your doctorate in counselor education, which equips you to not only teach students of counseling, but supervise them in that LPCC area of their professional lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, so you're getting information from somebody who has been trained to build up good therapists. We hope that you've enjoyed this, and we look forward to continuing this conversation next week.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/Candid Conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.